It isn't just Israel to blame for making Gaza an open-air prison. Egypt is to blame as well, and that's because Gaza also borders Egypt, and guess what? That border is closed to Palestinians trying to escape Gaza as well. I'm sure you're asking, why are they doing this? Surely opening it would be the most humanitarian thing to do, especially while Israel bombs and starves the civilians. Well, oversimplification alert, but the first thing we need to understand is that Egypt and Iran, and by extension the Muslim Brotherhood, really don't get on. The current Egyptian government in particular overthrew their Muslim Brotherhood aligned government about 10 years ago now, and thus Hamas, an offshoot of the Brotherhood, are an existential threat to the Egyptian dictatorship. And thus since 2013, Egypt has attempted to vilify Hamas, and by extension the Palestinians in Gaza who elected Hamas as well. In 2014, Egypt, for example, destroyed 1,300 smuggling tunnels that connected Egypt to Gaza. In 2015, they destroyed 3,000 buildings and a lot of farmland along the border to create a buffer zone, which also affected tons of Palestinians. Many consider this to be a war crime, and in the same year, the Egyptian president was sentenced to death for allegedly conspiring with Hamas and Hezbollah and trying to overthrow the government. In 2016-17, relations did improve somewhat, but that was mainly an enemy of my enemy is my friend situation, as Egypt decided that they needed to team up with Hamas to defeat IS. But this tension isn't merely because of the current government, it goes back quite a bit further. When Hamas were elected in 2006, Egypt closed the border, fearing Iran-backed militant groups like Hamas spilling over to Egypt as well. And there was also a huge border migrant crisis in 2008, where the UN estimated that half of all Gazans escaped to Egypt, and they even backed a naval blockade of Gaza in 2010, aiming to weaken Hamas. So the reason for the latest blockade is quite simple. Egypt does not want hundreds of thousands of Hamas sympathetic Palestinians and perhaps fighters crossing their border. Not only Egypt's economy is weak and can't really afford to support them, but they do genuinely run the risk of destabilizing Egypt as a whole, especially because they'd be entering the eastern region of Sinai, which is infamously difficult to govern. Another reason Egypt has given is their alleged respect for Palestinian sovereignty, which I suppose is somewhat plausible. If the Gaza Strip were to empty, Israel could simply annex it completely without needing to worry about the pesky Palestinian civilians. But I don't think Egypt particularly cares about the idea of Palestine in general. Especially in recent years, we've seen Egypt align more and more with the West, and thus Israel. In fact, they are one of the few Arab countries to have pretty good relations with Israel. So Egypt, yeah, they're also partially to blame for the suffering of civilians in Gaza. Thanks for watching.